Hello, and welcome to Essential Alchemy. Alchemy is defined as the power or process that changes or transforms something in a mysterious or impressive way. My hope is that the information in this podcast can help you transform your mood, your energy, physical health, or even connect some dots to help you shift your mental or emotional state. I'm your host, Jodi Cohen, a best-selling author, award-winning journalist, functional practitioner, lifelong learner, and founder of Vibrant Blue Oils, a company that sells proprietary blends of high-quality organic or wild-crafted essential oil remedies designed to help you return to your ideal mental, physical, and emotional state. You can find out more about me and my company at vibrantblueoils.com. And with that, let's get started with today's episode.
Hi, I'm your host, Jodi Cohen, and I'm super excited to be joined by my very dear friend, Mollie Eastman, to talk about our circadian blueprint, which is a really hot topic and one that I'm excited you're going deeper into. So for those of you that don't know Mollie, she is the creator of Sleep is a Skill and the host of Sleep is a Skill podcast. Sleep is a Skill is a company that optimizes people's sleep through a unique blend of technology, accountability, and behavioral change so necessary. After navigating insomnia while traveling internationally, she created what she couldn't find, a place to go and learn the skill set of sleep. And with a background in behavioral change from the nonverbal group, she became fascinated with the chronobiology and its practical application to sleep and our overall experience of life. Knowing the difference between a life with sleep and without, she's now dedicated her life to sharing the forgotten skill set of sleep. And she's working on what I'm sure will be a best-selling upcoming book. So welcome, Mollie.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that kind introduction and for your support in this journey of really sharing the importance of sleep and the ways that we can support getting that great sleep and your amazing products that help support that mission.
Yeah, I think it takes a village a little bit, especially when it comes to sleep. So
Yeah.
let's kick off. Tell me about, for those of people who don't realize how important sleep is, let's talk about sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about sleep, I mean, it might help to know that as you're listening to me as a speaker on sleep, it's like I've given my whole life to sleep at this point. It's my mission on the planet to help support people with their sleep. And yet it wasn't always a workable area for me. And part of how I think about my life now is in a 3-part series. One of how before life looked, before I had really the sleep breakdown, what that looked like during and after. And so before I had that real sleep breakdown, what life looked like was I didn't think too much about my sleep beyond it's just like, oh, this is my lot in life. It's a fixed thing. I have a lot of labels and narratives. I would say I'm a short sleeper. I'm a night owl. It's in my genes. I'll sleep when I'm dead. So I'd say all these things and I would then create a reality where I'd operate within that. And my habits got more and more pronounced. This was as a kid into teenage years, college and beyond. And over time, this kept going and going. And I wouldn't correlate as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends. Oh no, that suddenly I'm getting sick more and more frequently. I had the beginnings of an ulcer. I had shingles in my 20s. I had a lot more anxiety mounting. And yet I would be justified and righteous about my habits and say, well, I go to bed late. What's the big deal? I'll just wake up later. I'm an entrepreneur, so I can make my own hours. What's the problem? Not until I went through this period of insomnia that totally changed everything for me. And at some of my lowest points, I finally went to the doctors and I leave with sleeping pills. And which is, just so everyone knows, it's not supposed to be the first line approach. We are now supposed to actually begin with CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, before doling out prescription medications for sleep. And of course, you have some amazing things that can support people when they are struggling with their sleep and beyond. And yet that's what happened for me. So in that moment, it was like this panic of, now I've got this prescription, but what's the plan here? Like, am I just taking this indefinitely? Like, what am I going to do to get out of this problem? So it started this quest of learning about this thing that we do a third of our lives, on average 26 years. So went down the rabbit hole, spent a lot of time, money, energy, effort. And in the process, what ended up coming out on the other side was finally restoring my sleep. But that was, I shared before, it wasn't even that great before. So now I got to experience, wait, I can optimize my sleep. I can have this great sleep reliably, routinely, not just like once in a blue moon. And it changed my experience of life so much so that I couldn't stop talking about it. And what got developed was kind of these small groups, and they start growing and growing. And now we have sleep as a skill. So now we have online courses, podcasts, newsletters, work with high stakes poker players. We're in hotels and all these things. So I say all this because no matter where you might be at with your sleep, no matter if you're going through struggles with your sleep, or you've had times in your life with insomnia or sleep deprivation, or you're just think that you could improve it a little bit, no matter where you are on the spectrum, my commitment is that sleep is a skill and that we can learn some of these tools to up level no matter where you're at.
I love that. I mean, a couple of things that you touched on that really resonated was kind of this almost aspirational, like we'll sleep when we're dead. Like I remember in college, like pulling all-nighters, or when I worked in the tech industry, and really feeling proud of myself that look how productive I am. I'm not sleeping. And then, after I had my kids and they mess up your sleep, and then going through trauma, and sleep was hard. It's something you take so much for granted until you don't have it. And so unpack a little bit some of the cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep. When someone comes to you, how do you help them to start sleeping? Where do you start?
Yeah. So yes, the CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the kind of gold standard for addressing sleep across the board. Now, I bring in certain elements of that, but I bring in some new science around this thing called chronobiology. So the science of time and how time affects your biology. And part of that begins with the distinction of circadian rhythm, which you touched on in the beginning. So why do we start there? What we're seeing is that our circadian rhythm is this 24-hour kind of rhythm that we are on as human beings. And within that circadian rhythm, we're diurnal creatures, meaning that we're meant to be active by day and at rest at night. So it's kind of the blueprint. We're not nocturnal. We are meant to be active by day and at rest at night. And when we don't do that, we see some real deleterious effects come up. We see that with shift workers. We know that it's a possible carcinogen to engage in shift work, and we want to support those people because they're doing important work. But there is a reality to the fact that when we deviate from that rhythm, we see really real world effects, not only from things like cancer rates going up, diabetes, heart disease, mental health disorders, but also our course problems with our sleep-wake cycles. So the difference is, you might say, well, I'm not a shift worker. Why does this apply to me? But what we've seen is that since 2001, the EPA did a study, and they found that the average American was spending around 93% of their time indoors, and that included in automobiles. And that was in 2001, before a pandemic, before smartphones, Netflix, all the fun things that bring us inside and keep us in there. And so we can make the estimation that we're at least indoors around 93% of our days, if not much more, which I would wager we are. So why does that matter? Well, it turns out that the more we've gone indoors, that we have been obliterating the automaticity of this circadian rhythm. Because when we lived outside, a lot of this just got handled, because then we were dependent on the sun and the temperature changes and all that would happen when the sun would rise. It would warm up the environment. Now it's clear, okay, we only got so much time left to do whatever we got to do. And then the sun would set and it's kind of game over. But now we have this 24-hour opportunity to this comfort that we've created. But now there's a great book called Comfort Crisis that I think we're actually dealing with, which is this comfort crisis as it relates to sleep, because now we have this wonderful 72-degree environment that we're set up on 24/7. And we've got lights that can be on 24/7. Not realizing the major damning effects that this is having on our biology. So where we begin is in training and strengthening our circadian rhythm. So from a practical application point, if you're listening and you get nothing else out of what I'm saying, what we always want to begin with consistency. And we start with our wake up time. So we start with 7 days a week, getting around the same wake up time. So say it's 7 a.m. So we want to have 7 a.m. across the board, including the weekends. You can kind of swing it around plus or minus 30 minutes or so. So, but you're anchored at that consistent 7 a.m. example. Now, paired with that wake up time, we want to marry your wake up time with bright light exposure, and we want to get you outside to do that. So we don't want to have sunglasses or hats or anything on that can obstruct your ability to get that sunlight in your eyes on the first part of your day. And we want to do that consistently, especially even when it's cloudy or it's in the winter. A lot of people say, why bother? But actually, that means we want to be out, and we want to be out even longer on those days because the sun has been impeded. So you want to have this kind of equalizing effect by being out there longer. Getting sunlight, I've got these windows behind me if you see the video. So these are helpful because we still get some light cues, but they're still obstructing some of that full spectrum light. So there are studies that show that getting that light from behind a window can make it so that it can take 50 to 100 times longer to reset your master clock from behind a window. So as simple as just getting yourself physically outside or opening that window can make the difference to resetting that master clock. You can say, like, why does that matter? Well, the bright light in the morning communicates to your body that this is the time to start our day. And you can almost imagine this kind of invisible countdown clock that's going to help support that you're going to get sleepy in the hours later in the evening, so that you are actually with more automaticity falling asleep at the same time. Now, these factors are huge. So you want to aim for bright days and dark nights. And those are the two pieces that we'd want to begin with. Beyond light, so light dark is the most powerful, what's called Zeitgeber or time giver to impede or to strengthen your circadian rhythm. Below that is temperature, is meal timing, exercise timing, thought timing, and drug timing. All of these can also affect your circadian rhythm and the strength of it, which we can touch on as well.
I love that. I mean, for those of us that have dogs, we're ahead of the game.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I say that all the time.
Out the door. What is the optimal time to be outside in sunlight? How long should I take my dog walk?
Yeah, totally. And so this is one of these things where, again, it would be so nice if we could just say 10 minutes every day, bye. But it turns out there's kind of a dose dependent piece to this. And it depends on where you are on the globe. It depends on some of your health markers. It depends on your skin tone for a number of other reasons. So one, you can parse out this light conversation to a couple different factors. One being about vitamin D production, and you get kind of vitamin D production a bit later in the day. So that's a time when you need to be out for a stretch of time. For many people, so it can be around 20 minutes is often like the recommendation for that vitamin D piece, but it way varies based on where you are on the Fitzpatrick scale of your skin tone. So the Fitzpatrick scale, you find where you are on the skin tone piece. And so the darker your skin tone, the longer you need to be outside, because it's almost like this natural sunblock that has been created for you. And especially if you're in a northern latitude location, we really want to know these things because that can put you at a big disadvantage for producing enough of this vitamin D, which is a hormone. We got to get rid of this vitamin name part. We need to call it a hormone, which is what it is. And this can really affect your sleep, period, because it's part of the story to getting you sufficient serotonin, and serotonin is a precursor to melatonin. So that's for the vitamin D piece. So you need to be outside later in the day as well to get that, and you need to get that on your skin. But for the morning light piece, how long do I need to walk my dog component? What I would begin with at least is just looking at what can I do that I can consistently do? Because something is better than nothing. So even starting at around 5 to 10 minutes can be a behavioral win. And you're getting that with like kind of naked eyes. So no sunglasses and what have you on there. But we're starting there.
Those of us that wear regular glasses, does that block the light as well?
So this is a controversial topic. Some kind of circadian experts will say, no, it doesn't block things. There are other people that are kind of calling themselves quantum biologists, and this is a whole other conversation. So some of those individuals will say, actually, this can be obstructing. And if you think of a lot of our glasses might have like blue blocking tech, and our contacts might have that. So there's an argument with that camp that would say you would be better off even if you just tip your glasses a little lower so that you can get more of that light in your eyes. Then there could be an argument to be made for that.
I think I heard Ari Whitten saying like you're supposed to stare at the sun without any glasses or anything in the way.
Totally. So a controversial thinker on this topic is Dr. Jack Kruse. And so he's been a long time proponent on the naked eyes, no contacts, no glasses. Actually just had a really kind of controversial podcast with Andrew Huberman. And they touched on some of these. It was like 8-hour long podcast, like a 2-part series with Rick Rubin. Really, really interesting. But those kind of philosophies came to head because Huberman has said it doesn't matter. It's fine. You can keep your glass, keep your contacts. And Jack Kruse and other thinkers in his wheelhouse have thought otherwise. So you could, if you just got the glasses, just like kind of tip those down a little bit so that you can get the max
While
value.
they're selling or doing what they do. This is great though. I really love the blueprint of this. And it's almost like intermittent fasting where people say, you eat in this window. You're giving a very clear blueprint of here's, what you do first thing in the morning. Here's how you set your temperature. Can you share a little bit more of the blueprint?
Yes, totally. Okay, so you got your light dark piece, and the dark piece would be post sunset that we don't have any blue light in our environment is our goal, to the point that 250 circadian scientists have just released a kind of call to arms where they are asking for warning labels on light bulbs when used at night because of their effects on both sleep, cancer, diabetes, mental health, etc. So the solution to that would be to have things like candlelight, red lights, Himalayan salt lamps, fire, etc. So doing that in the evening is our goal. You can also wear blue blockers and that sort of thing. So that would be the nights. But then there's temperature is one of the next ones that's really important. So we want to be getting our body temperature up throughout the day because it's not meant to be static. So it's dynamic. So you're getting your body temperature up throughout the day. You might have warmer environment in your space if you're indoor. Most of us are in our space all the time. So we turn up the temperature ambiently. But then in the evening, we're markedly turning that down. And then if you can have available to yourself like a cooling mattress topper, say
like a chilly sleep pad.
Chilly sleep, exactly, 8 sleep, bed jet, these different things that can cool the bed. This is also evolutionary biology for a certain extent because we imagine we would have been sleeping on the ground in history as hunter-gatherers, which would have been the coldest spot in the environment. Very different from our kind of like foam beds with like duvets that trap all that heat in there. And so we think of some of these reasons why we wake up throughout the course of the night. And very commonly temperature is a component of that, not to mention hot flashes and all these things that we might go through. So that can be really, really important. But then you want to, go ahead.
I mean, I'm in kind of a mixed marriage. I'm always cold and my partner is always hot. And so he has the air on, and it's very complicated because his perfect temperature for sleep is different than mine.
Totally. Now, and we actually just had 8 Sleep on the podcast just yesterday, and they were speaking to some of their findings of some gender differences around temperature inclinations. So they see this after large, data sets of users and what have you. And so they find that women tending to need things to be a little bit warmer. And also we're dealing with, if we're of menstruating age, we're dealing with changes throughout our cycle as well to further complicate. But then men seem to want it cooler. So that's one of the beauty of having those cooling mattress toppers, because you can have your own select side and you can make it warmer if you want to make it warmer. Also, some of the newer ones like Chili just released a feature that can help support reading your body temperature, and same with 8 Sleep. So now there can be like a bit of an AI component. So it can be reading your temperature and kind of adjusting more in real time. So that's fun. So those are available. But then you want to look at what are some of the other things that you might be doing that could be impacting your body temperature. And a very common one is meal timing. You touched on it with intermittent fasting. Well, there's something called circadian rhythm intermittent fasting. And so that is the timing of your food and how markedly that can either move your circadian rhythm, like in the right directions or kind of wrong directions. So if you're eating in the night, especially, now we know bare minimum around 3 hours before bed is like the absolute minimum for our last bite of food out of research from Dr. Sachin Panda. But also anecdotally, I've certainly found out of our many, many individuals that are on the Oura Ring. So if every person we work with has to wear the Oura Ring to participate in our program. So we've seen tons of data around what moves the needle. And we've seen this in other sets as well. But 4 to 5 hours and sometimes more before bed, having your last bite of food, what we reliably tend to see is a drop in heart rate, improvement in HRV, and less sleep fragmentation. So including boosts in your deep sleep readouts on some of your wearables. So that would be the meal timing piece. Also, you're looking to front load your calories so that you're largely eating when the sun is out and not eating as much when the sun sets is kind of our general rule or goal, I should say. So with that, that's the meal timing piece. Now, exercise is another one that you can have a circadian component to. Now, we want to largely have our exercise happening pretty much by day for the most part when the sun would be out. And if we think about the ancestral blueprint piece, it's likely that our ancestors weren't running around doing squats or something at post sunset when it's totally blackout. Why would that be happening? Well, so we want to to bring and borrow some of that. The same rules apply with the food, because they probably weren't going to like some refrigerator or pantry at 9 p.m., 10 p.m. We were not doing those things. So we can lend and pull from what we likely were doing. This includes exercise. So we do see there's different studies that point to different things, seemingly some movement benefits in the morning, as well as some for the afternoon hours for lowering of injury risk, especially for kind of some concerns of elderly population as well, so that we're not, taking ourselves out with that exercise that's so important for sleep. Other things include 2 novel ones. So thought timing. We're now seeing that there's a bit of a diurnal lean to our thoughts. So we have different types of thoughts by day than we do by night, which is really interesting. And we've even had people on the podcast speaking to something called the Mind After Midnight study. And they found that in those wee hours in the morning, when many of us think of like the worst case scenarios and all the things that could go wrong, catastrophic thinking, there actually is research to support that we tend to do this. So suicidality rates sadly go up, anxiety, depression, kind of these flawed thought patterns seem to occur in those early morning hours. So this is helpful for us to know, because then we can kind of create a bit of a self-contract with ourselves to not really believe some of the thoughts that are coming out of our brain in those early morning hours, because we know that that's a flawed, faulty time for us. So that would
Meaning if you wake up like at 3 a.m. and you're okay.
And you're thinking of everything that could possibly go wrong,
Right.
just kind of create like this self-contract for yourself that we're not going to engage with some of these thoughts, and also just have like almost this filter on, knowing that this is sort of our danger hours, where for not just for all of us, that we're going to have some of that flawed logic. Now, in the lead up to that, in the evening hours, we find that there's kind of a difference in our brain activity if we set ourselves up powerfully to start down regulating in the evening, so that our brain isn't firing it all crazy and hyperactive in the evening hours. Hopefully we're feeding it kind of like nice, peaceful, relaxing things, and then doing a bit of an audit if we're engaging in materials, conversations, activities that are hyping us up and getting us all overly excited, even in an exciting way. Like maybe you're excited because you have a trip coming up and you're planning it and you're Googling about it or whatever. That EU stress can also, get us overly excited at the wrong time. So you want to have thought timing mechanisms in place so that you're engaging in those hyper, excitatory thoughts by day, The evening is more reserved for that downregulation thought patterns. Lastly, we also talk about something called chronopharmacology, drug timing. And drug timing is really interesting. So, what are our common drugs? Well, for one of the most common drugs is caffeine and the timing of that. And I love caffeine. I'm not saying you can't have
I
caffeine
love
to sleep great.
caffeine too. That's right. Caffeine in the morning, for some people, a glass of wine at night.
Totally, exactly. And clearly, one of the biggest things we see with wearable data is people realizing, oh, wow, I had no clue how much my alcohol or the glass of wine is showing up in my sleep results. So that can be really, really helpful to play with. So, worst case, even if you're moving that glass of wine earlier, we're kind of advocating for like really egregious happy hours or boozy brunch or something if you're going to engage in those things. But most of the time, ideally abstaining, because half the time, no matter where you shuffle these things, typically we see some forms, see it show up in your heart rate elevation or HRV drop, and that can just leave you feeling not so great. Other drugs that we commonly see, THC being a common one, that can also be similar to alcohol in its help with us falling asleep, but then the quality of that sleep can come into play. So that's something to be aware of too. Of course, pharmaceuticals, more recently, kind of plant medicine, seeing some of that show up on people's sleep results. So there's a lot that we want to make sure that even with our supplements, sometimes we can be taking, B vitamins or what have you too late. And then that can be wiring us and getting us all excited too at the wrong times. So you're just trying to audit all of these things that you're taking in and then helping to support your sleep results.
I love that. This is such an amazing roadmap and so clear.
I shared in my story that I was this upside down living person. So I was like a vampire, going to bed super late, waking up super late, not seeing, I couldn't even have told you when sunrise or sunset was during those years in my life. And yet, one of the great things that happens is when we start to align with some of these rhythms of nature, a lot of this stuff just kind of falls into place. And then we're not having to work so hard to both fall asleep and stay asleep. So, you might use some of your meditation apps or something to fall asleep, but you're no longer like dependent on some of these things where we see so many people like, oh, I just can't turn off my brain. I just would love to be able to flip a switch, or maybe I fall asleep, but then I'm up at 3 a.m. and now I'm just up for like hours. What do I do? And all of that stuff can often get handled with some of these things that we bring in that we had no idea were making such an impact on our sleep results.
Yeah, no, exactly. And smelling oils can help with thoughts, but it's not like there's a magic bullet. And I love that you've kind of it's funny that you teach poker and gambling.
Yes.
Teaching people how to take the chance out of what seems like a chancy situation. You're really doing the same thing with sleep.
Totally. Yes, so well said. Absolutely. Like that's one of the interesting things. I think before we maybe hit record, one of the things I was mentioning is that poker players are in casinos designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm. So everything we're talking about, they have no windows, they have tons of bow lights, lots of stimuli, slot machines. You have no idea if it's day or night. But sadly, many of us are living like that to some form. Like our phones have become our own slot machines and the dopamine hit of Instagram, Facebook, whatever. And not to mention, the Hulu, HBO, Netflix, all of these fun things and laptops.
I don't know. When I was growing up, like at midnight, the TV would go off. You get those, the national anthem music. Like it just
totally just done.
Yeah,
absolutely.
On demand, you can watch 24/7.
Yeah, exactly. And now, certainly, I had lived in New York City for many, many years. For some of COVID, I was in Vegas, another bright light area, and with the poker component. And, having the optionality to truly live a 24-hour lifestyle, it goes back into that comfort concern, because just because we can do it doesn't mean it's supporting our biology.
Exactly. This was so amazing. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to touch on?
Oh, I love that question. So I guess what I would say is really standing in this concept that sleep is a skill, not just but because one of the things I find for a lot of people is similar to what I was sharing, is that we might have amassed some of these labels and narratives, even if we haven't maybe ascertained or realized it quite yet, or you might know. But so we might have it that like, I'm a bad sleeper. Oh, I'm not a good sleeper.
Oh, self-talk.
Right,
Yeah.
that self-talk, or like, oh, I used to sleep great, but then menopause, but then I had the kid, and then, whatever. And so some of these narratives can impact our likelihood of getting curious and learning about some of these things. So we might just think, oh, this is not for me. It's not available to me. And two, what I would say is in the process of considering just trying on that, we drop some of those labels for now to explore how our sleep could be. I think that what can be on the other side is this whole experience of, oh my God, it is a skill set just like anything else. So we want to start at kind of sleep 101. So beginning there, and that you too can be a part of this. And then the other thing I would say too, that it would be amiss or missed if I didn't mention, is that there are over 100 sleep-wake disorders that are lurking that often go undiagnosed. So knowing that one, at very least, a very common one being sleep apnea, upper airway resistance syndrome. And so we know at least 1 in 4 individuals appear to have this, and we have kind of theories that there could be more. And what's the problem with all this is that because in the United States, there's only around 7,000 sleep professionals for millions of people. And our primary care doctors on average are getting about 2 hours of training in sleep, even at Harvard Med.
Well, medical practice is like based on no sleep deprivation.
Totally. Yes. That's their
Yes.
vantage point. Yeah. So if you're getting
Yeah.
any sleep, you're like killing it in their world. And so not from like a malicious standpoint, but just from a lack of training, they don't have a lot of tools or resources that they can really give you beyond the prescriptions. And so that for me is a concern, because then that's not allowing, there's a lot of red flags that can come up as people are sharing that would point, oh, this could be a sleep problem, but it's getting missed. So you really, unfortunately, right now need to advocate for yourself, need to learn about these things, and just know that it's getting easier and easier with wearables. I really suggest that everyone track if available to you, or even if not, there's really affordable or free apps that are on your phone that you could even use, or just track it with a pen and paper too, the old school sleep diary. So getting some numbers about what's going on. Then I would also say there's at home things that you can order now to test for sleep apnea. And they're usually around like $200 or so, even out of pocket. So things like Lofta, Empower Sleep, other companies that you can get those sent right away. So you can test for some, at least things like sleep apnea or upper air resistance syndrome. But sadly, people might have restless leg. They might have narcolepsy. They might have certain sleep disorders that they have no clue they even have, bruxism, teeth grinding, other things.
Yeah, no, this was incredibly helpful. How can people find out more about you?
Yeah. So at sleepasaskill.com, they can go on there and they can take a lot of action. So one, we have a free sleep assessment that you can just fill out a couple quick questions about what's going on with your sleep, get tailored advice back. We can also have a free downloadable PDF for the optimized bedroom, 18 high-tech, low-tech things that can be done to improve your sleep environment. You can get free podcast episodes with sleep experts. We can get every Monday for over 5 years, we've been sending something called Sleep Obsessions newsletter. So lots of free information in there of how you can improve your sleep. And then if you're still really struggling, then we have online cohorts, one-on-ones, and now something called a sleep audit that's been really popular. So say if you're wearing an Oura Ring or Whoop band, we can audit your current sleep data and then give you feedback on things that you can change right away to impact your sleep results.
I love this. Well, this was always a pleasure. I've learned so much. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me and for all the work that you do. And I love your oils. It's like the only oils that I have on my bedside, little nightstand. So appreciate you and excited for more.
You too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope this podcast empowered you with some useful information and takeaways. If you liked this episode, please consider sharing a positive review or subscribing. I would also love to offer you my free parasympathetic toolkit as a gift just for listening. It will teach you how to activate the most important nerve in your body to turn on your ability to heal. This free toolkit includes a checklist, a video, and a detailed guide. If this podcast prompted any questions, you can always find answers at my blog at vibrantblueoils.com or my book, Essential Oils to Boost the Brain and Heal the Body. Until next time, wishing you vibrant health.